Hello, I am here to talk to you today about the atomic bomb. Boom! Yes, that's right. We're talking about the device that ultimately was used to end World War II, particularly the war against Japan. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about in terms of the development of the nuclear bomb and the use of this device to help us end World War II. Where we're going to start this story is actually back in Germany. A guy named Adolf Hitler was actually trying to get his hands on a nuclear device. So he had all of his scientists working on enriching uranium that would help him get a hold of this device and then be able to use this device against his enemies, us. Okay, but Albert Einstein was living in Germany at the time, and then he and a group of scientists noticed that what was happening with this development of Germany getting closer and closer to having their own bomb. So what he did was he wrote a letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States at the time, and he said to the President, we need to do something in order to beat Hitler to having this particular device that he's going to use against his enemies. So what ends up happening is Franklin Delano Roosevelt gets together this group of the best scientists that the United States had to offer, the smartest guys you can think of, much smarter than me when it comes to developing nuclear weapons, of course. Now, what he called this project was the Manhattan Project, because really the ideas started to come together in Manhattan, New York, and that's really where the name comes from. But then what ends up happening is they move this project down to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and that's where all these scientists came together and started to build the first atomic bomb known to man. The first atomic bomb that was actually used was called Fat Boy. And when you look at the bomb, you can kind of tell why it's called that. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about a couple of the people that were involved in the development of the bomb. One guy in particular I want you to remember is a guy named Robert Oppenheimer. He was kind of like the head of this brain trust that was down in Los Alamos that was helping to develop this nuclear device as part of the Manhattan Project. So he was kind of the guy in charge. And he was a professor of quantum physics, science, craziness, right? This guy knew his stuff, and he was a professor at one of the large universities here in the United States. And he was kind of the go-to guy, the guy in charge of developing the nuclear bomb. Now, when this first bomb went off, Robert Oppenheimer said something quite profound. He referred to himself as this: Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. He knew the implications of developing such a device and really how this was going to change warfare and how countries interact with one another. And that comes into play more into the Cold War, which we talk about a little bit further down the road. Now, what I want to talk about is what ends up happening when this device is first used. Now, one of the things that is kind of interesting about this story is the development of who decides if we're going to use the bomb or not. Franklin Delano Roosevelt ends up dying towards the end of World War II, so that thrusts his vice president into this role as the person who has to become the decider if we use this bomb or not. And this guy's name was Harry Truman, and he really didn't even know about the Manhattan Project. That's how high level of clearance this project was and how important it was. And he didn't even know, so he had to get up to speed on this particular thing. Now, with that said, they had finally made the decision that they were actually going to use this bomb, and they looked at reasons for and reasons against using the bomb, and there's a whole bunch of those different reasons for and against. And we want to start thinking about, what considerations should we take if we're going to use such a powerful device? And I want you guys to think about that, and that's going to be something that you want to include in anything that we talk about in terms of the atomic bomb. Now, a couple of other things that we need to make sure that we know to have a full, well-rounded understanding of the development of the A-bomb, okay? One of the things that you want to know is the name of the famous airplane that dropped the bomb on these two cities in Japan, which we'll talk about in a second. The name was the Enola Gay, and it was designed as a bomber for just such a mission. And they brought this bomber and flew it over Japan, and really, it was kind of a calm day. They didn't see any resistance or anything like that. Now, one of the reasons why maybe they didn't see any resistance is because the two cities that these bombs were dropped on were Hiroshima, the first city, and the second city was known as Nagasaki. And one of the reasons why it was such a hard decision to make and such a controversial decision is that neither of these cities really had anything to do with the war. They weren't producing anything for the war. They weren't training soldiers. They were basically civilian cities that really were outliers when it comes to World War II and Japan itself. So really they didn't have anything to do with the war. And that's one of the controversial things, like I said, that really makes this a hard decision and really a hard concept to grasp at times when we're talking about things like morality and who we're dropping this bomb on. But the things that you really want to know are, what was the Manhattan Project? Who was Robert Oppenheimer? What were the cities' names that these bombs were dropped on? We want to know what was the name of the plane that dropped the bomb, and also think about those reasons for and against. You've got a whole bunch of those resources that I hope you use, and I hope this gives you some insight into the development of the atomic bomb.